Hello, everyone. Today is January 23rd, 2022. I'm here today with Josh Jain. Josh is an engineer and aspiring surf photographer. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Josh.
Hey man, it's great to be on here. Appreciate you having me.
Yes, you're welcome. So, aspiring surf photographer, how did you get into surf photography?
Well, I've always loved surfing. Been surfing since I was in middle school. Um, and one of the things I realized as a surfer is I'm not really the most competitive guy out in the lineup. There's often times, like in a crowded peak or a crowded wave, that you'll have multiple surfers going for the same wave. So you kind of got to compete, and usually the strongest surfer will get the wave. Um, so I kind of, was getting like a little bummed out that my wave counts were pretty low. Um, but then one day I paddled out there with a GoPro and just started filming people, and I was just so stoked, and like it just kind of felt right, like something I wanted to do. And so I started out with a GoPro, and then I got myself two mirrorless cameras and been shooting from the shore. And I'm trying to get one of those waterproof housings so I can shoot in the water, and it's kind of like I can experience surfing, um, and like look for new perspectives, through the lens of my camera. And it's like I can experience it without having to compete for those waves. So it's just awesome. It's a real passion of mine.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
so you said the strongest surfer. What usually after you've been a photographer and you've probably witnessed people attempting the same wave, what makes the strongest surfer?
So it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. There's actually rules regarding when there's multiple people going for the same wave. Um, Usually, the person who's closest to the peak of the wave, which is where it just starts to break and crest over, has the priority. And so they'll paddle and they'll go, and everyone else is supposed to get out of their way. But if that person doesn't paddle hard enough to match the speed of the wave, and someone else like further down the wave does, that person basically gets that wave, even though they didn't have priority on it. So, um, yeah, just the strongest paddler out there.
Got it. Strongest
Yeah,
paddler out there. It's
yeah,
really about who's the strongest paddler.
yeah. It seems to be. Yeah,
Wow.
it can be for sure.
And you started with a GoPro and then began filming from the shoreline.
Yeah. So the GoPro, you have to get fairly close to your subject to shoot. So you basically have to be swimming out there and like basically just tread water right where the waves are breaking, and then film, and then also watch the wave so it doesn't, you know, just tumble you into shore. But the nice thing about having a good camera and a good lens is, yeah, you can just sit comfortably from shore. If you have a telephoto telescoping lens, like I shoot with a 400 millimeter on my EOS RP, and yeah, it gets right in there right from shore. So um, it's a really relaxing way to spend an afternoon just shooting surfers.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And if you're GoProing, are you out there with any float, like a board of any sort, or are you literally treading water just with your GoPro stick?
So it kind of depends on the beach. Like most of the time, I'll just be out there with my flippers and my GoPro, and I'll just be treading water out during the break, holding my camera up, filming people. Um, but on some beaches where they don't allow swimmers where the surfers are, I'll just take a board out there and sit on my board and then film people that way.
Nice.
Yeah.
Could you take a paddleboard out there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you could take a stand-up paddleboard out there. I don't know what it's like to try to film from that thing, but I see lots of stand-up paddleboarders out there.
Got it.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's actually something I've always wanted to try. It looks like a pretty good workout.
Yeah, it is a good workout. It's not that easy. You'd think it'd be
Doesn't work that
easy,
way.
but it's not.
It's like you gotta have a lot of balance to stay on that thing, you know?
No, balance isn't that big of a deal. Honestly, the paddleboard does most of the work with the balance. It's such a big board and
Right.
thick. It's and then you can go from your knees too, paddleboarding from the knees or paddleboarding from your, sitting in cross-legged position too.
Huh. I see people doing yoga on those things, man. It's pretty rad.
Yeah, exactly. The balance is it's
Yeah.
really, like there is, of course, it's not like standing on solid ground, but it's not like the board does a lot of the balancing.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
But you should try it for sure. I mean,
Absolutely.
find someone who has a paddleboard or rent a paddleboard
Yeah. Yeah. You
easier
just
than
rent one. That'd be fun.
purchasing.
Yeah.
Yes. But you also climb, Josh.
That's right. Yeah. Um,
How
I
long have you been climbing?
um, not long. Probably been seriously climbing since the middle of 2020. Kind of started during the pandemic because, um, like, for whatever reason, surfing was illegal for some reason, but outdoor climbing was still a viable option. So, just on a whim, I just bought a bunch of gear, like taught myself how to set up the anchors, and I am not recommending anyone do this. You know, if you want to go outdoor climbing, please, get yourself
Go
a
with
good
someone.
guide or a class. But I just went out there with my best friend and we did it, and here we are today. And we kind of learned what mistakes we made and just built our knowledge. And yeah, we were climbing outside for a long time, and then once the gym started opening, we got our memberships at Mesa Rim, and here we are having a blast.
Wow. I didn't realize you started in 2020.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
I had kind of done it a little bit during college. There's that small climbing gym over near the pool at Pepper Canyon, and I never really got into it. I was just like, yeah, it's fun, really tiring, really, really good workout, but I never really saw it as anything beyond that until I started going outdoors, and then just something about being outside and just climbing on these rocks and just giving it your all, and it's like, okay, this is a cool hobby.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And as someone who doesn't go outdoors, I mean, I do go outdoors for sure, but I
yeah,
don't go outdoors to rock climb outdoors.
right.
And I only do it indoors, and I've got to say, it's like, as someone who enjoys working out, it's a killer workout,
Oh man, yeah,
and it's pretty functional, like, and it's hard unless you fall poorly, which happens occasionally, but doesn't happen too often. It's like pretty safe, and grip strength is very underrated.
oh
Like
man, yeah.
like I mean, rock climbers have a sort of grip strength that no one else can parallel.
Seriously, yeah. The only other people I can think that have it are like grapplers, or wrestlers or jiu-jitsu practitioners. But yeah, like rock
I don't
climbers
e
are
I don't think it parallels rock climbing. I think
okay,
because I mean, they have strong grip strength, but,
right?
like, I think if they rock climbed, they would still have a stronger grip strength.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, climbers and in particular boulderers, where like you're doing all these powerful moves, and getting your bodies in this awkward positions, are just some of the most in shape people I've ever met. Like, it is insane what they can do.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's all
Boulders,
from climbing, man. It's crazy.
yes. Yes, it is. It's a very intensive workout.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's your favorite outdoor climb?
Um, so I haven't really ventured much beyond San Diego, like the local crags here. I think my favorite outdoor climb is a route called the Ramp over in Mission Gorge. And it's just this fun, like 70-foot wall. And it's just like a mixture of all these different types of climbing. And it's just really fun. And, you can really just like let go and like try different techniques and just really enjoy the climbing. It's I'd say so far that's my favorite route, but I'm always looking to go out to like Joshua Tree and possibly Yosemite or Tahoe or places like that and see what I can do up there.
California seems like it's pretty renowned for climbing in relativity to like almost every other place in the world.
Yeah,
Maybe Europe has a lot of climbing.
yeah, or Colorado or something like that. Yeah.
Yes, the west coast of the United States seems to be where most of the like where climbing is a common thing. If you meet a climber, it's not like, oh, whoa, it's not a weird thing. But and do you know about how I know that there's a lot of Europeans, but like how outdoor rock climbing works around the world? Because I remember like seeing this maybe a year ago before COVID that Alex Honnold was going out to Africa to create routes, to
Mm.
create rock climbing routes. And like, so I'm just wondering, are there like highly available outdoor climbing routes outside? I don't think they're everywhere in the world.
Yeah, yeah, and I I mean I hear about rock climbers like pushing out the super exotic locations. Like there's climbers like in parts of like northern Canada where it's like freezing, basically Arctic conditions, and they're out there climbing. And there's climbers that are climbing in Antarctica, these different routes. And um, I think, yeah, I think basically they get sponsored by like National Geographic or like some other adventure outlet to go out and just put up these routes.
Wow.
Um, and I mean, it seems like a pretty rad job. I wouldn't mind doing that, but um,
It's kind of scary doing it for the
yeah,
first time.
I always wonder like what it's like to be like a route setter outdoors. Like what goes through their minds. Like how do they even know if something's climbable without having like what amount of preparation goes into that?
That's a lot of knowledge, like not just like inherent knowledge that comes pretty naturally to that person to have that
Right,
confidence. They have to have a lot of use cases, a lot of experience doing
right,
outdoor climbing because it's like you're exactly right. Like there are things that they see that just because of their experience and because of their experimentation that as not like you, not necessarily you, I've not rock climbed outdoors once, and I probably rock climbed indoors over 250 times.
right.
So it's like, huh, you guys will see something that a person who's never been on there will not has no chance.
Yeah, I think you're right. It has to do with experience because like there's some routes where I look at the route and I'm like, how is this climbable? Like the holes are so tiny and just so minuscule and so far apart. Yet, there's bolts on it. It's a climbable route, and there's people who have climbed it, and it's it's interesting. And I actually got some insight. Like one of my favorite movies is the Dawn Wall. It's Kevin Jorgensen and Tommy Caldwell's attempt to climb this free climb rather this section of El Cap that had never been free climbed. It had been climbed before, but like using other tactics. So they spent years just studying the wall and piecing together this route. And at the time, it was considered like the hardest route in the world, like the hardest free climb in the world. And um, yeah, after a couple of years of research, they finally figured out the route and you know spent like I think it was like I don't know, it was like 13 days or 2 weeks or something like that actually climbing the thing. It was pretty impressive. It's definitely one of my favorite documentaries.
Were they attached to each other?
Um, I think I know what you're getting at, but so they were just oh sorry, I don't know what that was. Um, they were, so in a sense, like it's kind of like um, have you lead climbed before or no?
No,
Just in
no,
top rope stuff.
just top rope.
So they were in a sense tied together, but the belayer was tied to the wall, anchored to the wall, and then belaying their partner through the anchor, and their partner was basically lead climbing it, where you don't have a top rope, but you just have a rope to basically um, catch any of your falls that you clip in along the way. It's well, it's a lot harder to explain, like than I thought. So it's
Wow. It
yeah,
sounds very intimidating.
it's definitely a lot more scary taking a fall while free climbing than on top rope, I have to say, at least in my experience.
I can imagine. What's the
Yeah.
reason you say that?
Well, you just fall further, and
Yes.
basically you have the rope attached to your harness, um, and like you fall twice the distance between where you last clipped in your rope to your protection. Um, so it's you can take some pretty massive falls, like 20, 30 feet, depending on like where your last piece of protection is or your last bolt that you clipped. It's I mean, I'll never get over that fear, no matter how
No.
long I climb.
And I went to Joshua Tree like 4 or 5 months ago, and
Mhm.
there were, a bunch of climbers there, and one of the climbers was like, "Yeah, pretty much the only thing you do is don't die."
Joshua Tree is known for having just really, really scary routes that have very scant protection. So
Really?
yeah, yeah.
Do you
Um,
hear about outdoor climbers falling? Like, how often do you hear a story like that?
um, Not very often, actually. Like you said before, climbing is a very safe sport as long as you do everything, correctly as it's intended. And, you always maintain your equipment and check your equipment and use it properly. Um, I mainly only hear about deaths in climbing when it's could have been avoided, like when somebody is um, rappelling down from a route. You're supposed to tie a knot at the end of the rope, and that knot is like your safety mechanism. It prevents you from basically rappelling off of the rope and falling to your death. And like even some professional climbers, like people who've been doing this stuff for years, forget to tie that knot and just fall hundreds of feet to their death. It's sad because it could have been avoidable. Um, but I very rarely have heard, of somebody dying while climbing properly. So maybe, I mean, lots of injuries. It's a risky sport, but I haven't heard of someone dying if they're doing everything, as it's intended.
Yes. Usually, you know, with things like that, a lot of times it's something very obvious. Like I think
Yeah.
I like to hunt, and I was very aware of bears in Montana.
Mm.
And this year in Montana, a woman was killed by a bear, and the it was very unfortunate. She was a Californian woman, and
Yeah.
she was biking through, and the bear they apparently had food in the tent.
Oh no.
The bear came in,
Yeah.
bothered them. They scattered or they like got the bear to leave. The bear
Mm.
left, came back. I think they had already, after doing that, they had cleaned up all the food because they realized, but it didn't matter because the bear
Right.
came back and then mauled the woman, and like then they, unfortunately killed her. But that's the
Right.
same thing. It's like you hear that and it's like, okay, that's very preventable. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a tragedy nonetheless, but it's something that you hear all the time. Like, don't keep your food in your tent, and for, people who are going to climb outdoors, tie that knot when you're rappelling downwards.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I actually read about that. Yeah, it's terrible, absolute tragedy. So, I know you bow hunt, right? Did you carry a sidearm with you for bears or anything in particular for the bears?
I didn't go to Montana. In
Hmm.
Colorado, um, there's no brown bears, so I
Okay,
didn't.
right.
And so no, I didn't, because in Colorado, it's pretty much Montana, possibly Idaho,
Hmm.
Wyoming for sure.
Yeah.
Those three states mostly, and maybe Washington, but if you're mostly those three, and it's mostly Montana and Wyoming that are going to have brown bears.
Oh
And
yeah.
the other states, like even California, like I ran into a bear in California, but
Hmm.
it's a black bear. It's not as vicious. It's not as savage. It's not as
Right.
ruthless as a brown bear is.
Yeah.
So I feel more confident doing that. Also, Alaska, obviously.
Oh
Alaska
yeah.
has a lot of brown bears. Have you been
Definitely.
to Alaska?
No. I it's definitely on the list of places I want to go though.
Me
You know.
too.
Yeah. I've always wanted to see the Northern Lights, and it's Alaska is
Yep.
a great place to see them, and along with all the hiking and climbing they have there, it's yeah, it's a
Aren't the
spot I'd love.
Northern Lights kind of a winter thing? Don't you have to be there like in March and February to see them?
Yeah, I think there's a certain, and I don't know exactly, but I think there is like a certain sort of season that they're the most visible. Um, but yeah, I haven't,
I
don't
believe it's
recall when that
this.
is.
I believe I've researched it. I believe
Okay.
it's this upcoming season, like this winter season, February and March
Hmm.
are peak times for the Northern Lights. Because in the summer, it's like it's a day
That's
all day.
yeah, yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, you're not going to see very much.
Exactly, exactly. So if you
Yeah,
actually want to see the Northern Lights, you have to go in like the next 3 months. I believe.
I got you.
Don't
Yeah.
don't quote me. I really want to go. I mean, like I just came back from Mexico, and like that's a great place in itself.
Oh
And like
yeah.
Alaska is just the complete opposite sort of feel. And like I love that. I love being in those mountainy places with cold lakes and green everywhere and big trees and big, like just, like pretty much deer, places
Yeah.
where deer are. I really like those places. So it's like a balance. I mean, you recently, I've seen it this season. I think last season you were doing a lot of winter mountaineering, like winter. I think it's called mountaineering. The way you were climbing up. I mean, it wasn't actually climbing with the hands.
Right.
It was hiking, but
Yeah.
it's very elevated and at high, elevations.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done a few mountaineering trips, and I mean it's yeah, like exactly. The main difference is there's a lot more snow and ice, which requires the use of specialized equipment. So I have an ice axe, mountaineering boots, crampons. Um, the cold and the wind are always a huge factor um, on those types of peaks. So you have to make sure you have the appropriate clothing. Um, and also, like, there's a couple other, like, avalanche safety is something you need to keep in mind always.
Absolutely.
Learning how to read weather reports and mountain forecasts. The last thing you want is to get stuck on the top of a mountain when a storm runs in or comes on in. So um, it's definitely a lot more risky than your
Yes.
standard hiking. But I think it's just so magical being out there, and like it allows you to kind of reach places that if there's no trail, kind of access like the inaccessible in a way. So
Yes.
it's it's a neat hobby. I definitely am glad to have met several people who kind of introduced it to me and shared their knowledge with me. And yeah, I'm hoping to depending on like travel situation, um, try to go bag a few more peaks this year.
Nice.
Yeah,
And I have a question about this, but to go on to what you said, um, creating your own trail, that's definitely for hunters a huge thing as well.
yeah,
And it's not always that simple. And I guess going back to what you're saying, for mountaineering, it sounds uh, frightening to say the least, or at least more nerve-wracking than hunting, because hunting you can stay on level ground, you don't have to go, and even if you go up, you're not going to go up like too high, you're usually going to see it. And then, but like mountaineering, that can be very high.
yeah. It's all about risk management and learning
Yes.
how to, like, as a hunter, you kind of learn how to read tracks and like track an animal. As a mountaineer, you have to learn how to read like, the conditions of the snow, like the angle of elevation, or rather the angle of the slope that you're intending to climb. You have to take into account like the wind on the face that you're attempting to climb, because the last thing you want to do is cause an avalanche. Especially if you're in an area with recent snowfall or um, unfamiliar territory. And there's also, I haven't encountered this yet, but there's also these crevasses, and there's a risk of falling into a crevasse. And if that happens, and your partners aren't familiar with the techniques to get you out, you can be stuck there for God knows how long until search and rescue comes to pull you out. Um, so like the danger level is just, it's heightened a little bit, but like the way you mitigate that is, you take your avalanche safety courses, you make sure to invest in good gear, you learn how to like read signs, um, that foretell about these hazards that you might face, and you just manage the risk. That's all it is to it.
Absolutely. Risk management, that's a
Yeah,
key to being an outdoorsman. It's a key to being a human being. It's
absolutely.
just the nice thing about doing these outdoors activities, hunting, mountaineering, even camping to a certain degree, or
Right,
backpacking for sure, is risk management becomes very obvious very quickly, whereas being a human being in civilized society, I think it's much slower. The level, like, risk management and the consequences of our implementation of risk management
right,
come by much slower until they slap us in the face. Whereas in the outdoors, it's so primal, usually, like mountaineering, that's primal. Hunting, that's primal.
right.
Camping and backpacking, that's primal. So these things are like very ingrained in us.
Mhm.
The risk management there is so much more ingrained in us versus the risk management of being a human in society.
Right,
So it's just like it's easier to take in, it's easier to handle. I feel like it's a little bit more natural of a risk management, and it's a nice outlet to realize that this is something that you can apply back into a civilized world.
right,
And also just being out there, like taking on a little bit of that, like, kind of question mark of, is this safe, but like in a more primal and a little bit more guided sense than some of the more civilized things of, is this safe, like
right.
risky investments, or you know things of that nature.
Right. And I think a part of it is, depending on what you're doing, like, the consequences of not managing the risk when you're outdoors, like surfing or climbing or mountaineering or hunting, are a lot more severe than, oh, like, oh, this, like, I might lose a few $100s or something like that on a risky investment. Like, you might get seriously injured or killed, if you're just carefree and, not taking into account like the dangers of what it is you're doing. Um, so,
Eh,
hopefully when you're out in that environment, you kind of realize that, and, you don't get paralyzed, with fear that prevents you from going out there and doing it. You just find that acceptable level of risk that you're willing to take based on, like your knowledge, your experience, um, or what have you, and just find that line, and just do it as safely as you can. So,
Yeah, it's definitely dangerous activities we partake in,
right.
and you know, research is very that's research is very critical. I like bow hunting for that reason because
Right.
I uh I was it's during August and September and early October,
Hmm.
whereas and those are great times to be outdoors in general
Absolutely.
versus like now. I don't really like to go camping now or backpacking now
Hmm.
or anything right now because it's just cold.
It's freezing.
It's freezing.
Yeah.
The days are shorter versus in 6 months they're going to be much longer,
Right.
and the risk is much higher. Like honestly, like the cold and that weather bring
Oh,
on so much more risk. I mean, we definitely have fires which bring on a lot of risk, but
mhm.
those are so in our face, and our state is so, the management on those things are very high, so it's like
Right.
almost to a killer extent. But to be real, there was a lot of fires with hunters, and I saw a couple of pretty crazy videos of hunters putting out fires in the
No,
middle of
no
the
way.
forest. Yeah.
Man, man, that's crazy. Yeah, didn't you have a few trips that were canceled because of these fires in California, like a year or two back, something like that?
No, just 6 months back,
6
5
months back.
months
Oh
back.
wow.
Yeah, completely canceled. I was there. I was about to go backpacking into a national forest, and the guy was like, "You have to go back. There's no
Oh man.
allowance." And then he said there's a $4,000 fine, and I was like, "All right, I'm
Yeah, it's
gonna
not worth it.
not worth it at all for
Damn.
sure."
Damn. Sorry to hear that, man.
I'm sorry too. I literally drove from I literally heard that at around 4:45 p.m.
Yeah.
and then straight up drove from like the northwest side of Yosemite National Park east until I got to the 395, and then I just bolted down to San
To
Diego.
San Diego. That's like an 8 hour drive.
Yeah, it's
That
like a
is
7-hour drive,
7 hour
but
drive.
yeah, maybe 7.5. Yeah.
Yeah,
So at
man.
the time I was pissed, but it's still we live in an amazing state. I didn't
Yeah,
like, we have the Sierras, we have the desert in the south, which is okay. We have
right.
the beaches in the south, which are very nice. We have the central part part of the state, Santa Barbara Slough, which is
Oh,
beautiful.
I love it. Yeah,
And then we have the bay, but even past the bay, dude, like the Lost Coast, Mendocino,
yeah,
Humboldt County and all that.
yeah,
Those are like places that I'm not very familiar with that seem pretty amazing. Shasta,
yeah, yeah. No, I actually think that's kind of the hidden gem of California is like that Lost
absolutely.
Coast, Mendocino, Eureka, Sonoma, areas around the Russian River, Shasta, Lassen. Like, those are kind of the parts that, in my opinion, get a little overlooked when people come to visit um, California. It's like, the northmost that they go is San Francisco Bay Area, and then it's all going down south from there. Um, but if you really want to get that coastal redwood experience, you got to go up to NorCal, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The true north.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it's but you really have to trek out there. Like there's no towns, like there's no big cities. Like
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I mean, you got
there's not even
Reading,
one. I can't
Mount
believe it.
Shasta. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
Arcata in Humboldt, I think has a airport, but like I honestly can't believe there's not like a real city, like a big one, like
Yeah.
it's San Diego, LA, San Francisco type of city in the entire, like what, 40% of California
Yeah.
above Sacramento. There's not a single city that's like a huge metropolitan city.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, yeah, and it is kind of a different culture up there, and you're absolutely
Yes.
right. Like,
They probably don't want it.
well, yeah, yeah. Matter of fact, I mean, they wanted to make the independent state of Jefferson. There was some news about
Really?
that a couple of years back, um, and of
There's
course,
no way.
nothing came of
Yeah,
it.
no
Yeah, but
way.
yeah,
Sacramento would never, even
there's
people
no
from
way.
South would never allow it. It's like that's
No.
where our water comes from, bro.
Absolutely, but yeah, that's interesting. I never really thought about that. There's no real major besides like Reading, which in
Isn't
comparison to
major.
LA and San
Or
Diego,
Sacramento.
or
I
Sacramento,
mean,
it's yeah,
it's nothing.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, Reading, is there another city in between Reading and Sacramento that's of note?
um, I mean, there's Santa Rosa, Sebastopol, but those are still kind of have that Petaluma, kind of have that sort of town kind of feel. It doesn't really feel like you're in a big city with high-rise buildings or anything like that. Um, I actually, yeah, I mean, I haven't explored that entire area yet, but I have yet to see like a city quite like that up there.
Dude, we should go in April. Like I'm going turkey hunting in April, so I'll definitely be up there.
Hmm.
But that's a that's a cool, like cool part of the state for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, like a nice little backpacking trip on the Lost Coast is always a good time.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Wow.
yeah,
So leaving the outdoors, another thing that you and I have in common is we were both electrical engineering majors at UC San Diego.
yep,
We
yep,
took a lot of courses together.
yeah. It's yeah, I specifically remember EC 103, man. That was
We had a crew of people that were struggling.
that class was diabolical,
I think
man.
that averages were in the 30s and the 40s.
Yeah, it was pretty low.
What was
Actually,
his name? The professor?
um Professor Shadi Daya, I think.
Yeah, that's it. That was it.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to retake that class. I did not pass it. You know, I
Wow.
man, I struggled like really, really hard in that class, and I did much better the next time I took it with a different professor. But um, yeah, that was definitely my least favorite ECE class.
103?
Yeah,
Dude,
absolutely.
there were some pretty gnarly ones. I mean, the 100 series was pretty crazy.
Yep.
I failed 107 the first time,
Mm,
which was really, you know, that's a really tough
that
course,
was a.
electromagnetism.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And then 109 signal, I think probability and statistics was really, I don't know. I took it in a sense, I took it with a professor
hmm,
that was, he gave either 40, 60 midterm final or 100% final. And I ended up doing 100% final.
yeah,
Do you remember this? Did you hear of this
yeah, yeah,
professor?
yeah. I used to surf with him, Professor Ziegler. I
That's
think.
him, dude.
Yeah, yeah. We'd surf at the pier at CM. I actually took luganoni. I never took his class because I did not like that grading structure. I was like, that is too stressful for me.
I had to
Yeah.
take him for some reason, but Luganoni I heard was much better. Was Luganoni the older man?
Yeah. He's quite old. He'd been at UCSD forever, and he, always taught that class. So,
He taught another course too. I forgot which was it 45? He
um,
or 65. He taught me in one course and I completely forgot which one.
yeah, I don't remember. It might be. Yeah, I thought he taught like 153 or something, but that could have been something else, someone else. Um, but yeah,
That
man.
What did
Just
you think about the ECE department?
um, I actually um, I kind of grew to like it more. Like my senior year when I became more involved and started working at their makerspace lab and also at the Jacobs School of Engineering's makerspace lab. Because then I got to know the professors on a closer level rather than just office hours and like seeing them in class. Um, so I thought, initially, like the first 2 years of college, I was like really questioning, like, do I really want to do this? Like, this is super hard, and like I'm spending all these hours studying, and like, you know, um, I'm getting just destroyed, in some of my
Yes.
classes. Um, but then, once we survived kind of the 100 series and like the lower divs, it just started getting easier, and maybe we just got better at studying or better with the material. Um,
Or
but
maybe the curves were a little bit more in our
maybe the
favor.
curves were a little bit more in our favor. I don't know. But then I actually really started liking it. I was like, okay, this is kind of a cool major. Like, let's see what this is like. And um, you know, I've been working in engineering for, gosh, almost 5 years now, and there hasn't been a dull moment. Though I am trying to take classes in computer science to, kind of go explore that field because, um, I mean, for one, it just pays better
Pays very
depending on your
good.
role. Yeah, the pay is very good, and also I think it's a little bit easier to debug code than it is to debug a circuit board. You don't have to deal with some of the headaches that you encounter when you're like designing hardware and things like that. So, um,
Designing hardware is it's a whole different ballgame.
yeah, yeah, it can get quite frustrating, but it's cool when your designs work. Um, but yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like, you know, I was uh, I was kind of using what I learned in school for probably only like the first year and a half of like when I started my career. Um, and then, beyond that, it became kind of just doing things that I learned through on the job training or just like, got experience interacting with on a day to day basis. And, now it's like I have like a lot of my textbooks from college and, because I figured I'd use them as a reference throughout my career. But I'm like, man, I think about my day to day task. I'm like none of these books are going to come in handy. It's kind of interesting how that happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And I mean, we have new problems to solve,
right.
and the integration of knowledge is going to be huge. Like, at there's just a new, I don't know, there's a lot, like we should definitely hold on to the old traditions and the old values of knowledge,
Hmm.
and being a professional in a certain sense is worth doing, but a lot, a lot of rules have been changed with the internet, with the massive supply of knowledge available.
Hmm.
And I think a big part I've heard is integration, like being able to bring all of these different disciplines together and determining, like, I think the integration between electrical engineering, bio, and software
Hmm.
is going to be, over the next 50 years is going to be like this bioengineering, electrical engineering, and software. Like, of course, chemistry too. Like, chemistry
Yeah.
plays a huge part in like electrical engineering when you take the protons and electrons in, and when you mix biology in, that's going to be chemistry as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So, um, you know, I don't I don't know what's going to happen. It's pretty complicated, but you
Yeah.
know, I think that there's definitely a lot of room for things to grow in that department of bringing these different disciplines together, and not necessarily, you know, maybe, it is going to be a sort of uh m- I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but a growth in the way in our knowledge base through integration, a growth of understanding, hopefully in the
Hmm.
correct fashion. But, we'll see how it goes. The next 30 years, 30, 40 years are going to be really interesting, how technological development is going to, transition, and how it's going to transition in the bio and patient experience sense.
Right. Well, that's actually a really interesting topic that I've kind of thought about. So a while back, I was reading a study um, on Facebook, well now Meta, that was released on the effect of the app or the platform on the mental health of, like, I think it was like teenage girls was the target audience. And I wish I had the name of the study. I'll try to send it to you later. But basically, the results of the study were, it had some pretty detrimental effects on, the mental health of these girls. So it kind of makes me also wonder about the intersection between, like you were talking about the different disciplines, different fields of knowledge coming together, but what about like the intersection of like psychology with technology, like how we perceive technology and how technology affects us, or like even ethics, really. It's like, just because we have the ability to build this, without quite knowing what its effects are going to be, should we do it? You know, it's it's kind of a interesting thing to think about, at least to me.
It is. And there are it's very tough because there is a huge sort of bagging on technology.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
I talked to a older gentleman, 80 plus years old, and he was saying, now with tech these days, everyone's, not really social and whatnot.
Hmm.
And, that's a perspective on it, but I don't know if I'm of that same belief system. And the reason is because, yes, it's what you make of it. And we've had these sort of, you look at like ancient scripture, like not ancient religious scripture, and there's always a sort of dichotomy between doing good and doing evil.
Sure.
And I think that dichotomy exists in modern day use of technology. Like, yes, you can, and it's not necessarily evil. It's like some a dichotomy of actions that will help us, feel fulfilled and happy, versus actions that will make us feel empty and alone and
Right.
sad. And
Right.
so I think, you know, it's absolutely the case that like we might be predisposed to like wanting, or predisposed to sorts of emotions and feelings that
That's true.
would,
Yeah.
you know, with these sort of Instagram or whatever, make us feel bad. But then we're there's a lot of good things to come out of the phone.
Yeah.
And do you have something to say?
Oh, no, 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 no. Sorry to interrupt.
No, and then so it's really like, and it's not easy. Like I can spend my whole day on Instagram too, like
Yeah.
today, and it's not necessarily worth it. But there's a lot of good that can come out of it too. It's like I can also find out some knowledge real quick. So like if I think something is wrong, like if I think something and
Mhm.
that my thought is just a false thought, I can research it right away, or someone else can research it right away and just tell me the truth. It's like, oh, I thought this historical event happened like this, and it's actually no, it didn't
Right.
happen like that. And you can, put that to bed right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree with you. In my perspective, I think, the good of technology, that all it's done still outweighs, some of the detrimental effects. And, I think that's just a consequence of the world we live in. Different people respond to it, use it differently. Um, yeah, like I could spend all day on Reddit, on my phone, and it's like, it's I can read up all these different interesting things, and um, or just waste my time looking at memes, and it's ultimately my choice how I decide to use that technology. Um, but I do have to say, um, I don't know how I would have made it through school without, having access to the internet. Like I can't even comprehend like how my parents made it through college, with just, access to a library and like, basic computer access. If they even had computer access, it's just really interesting to think about.
It's very interesting. And I think
Yeah,
we were in a, position of, and I think education's still in this position of learning how to integrate the internet into its curriculum.
absolutely.
And I
Yeah.
think it struggled really hard. Not the CSE department. The CSE department was lights out.
Yeah.
And had the opportunity to be in that department. But like a lot of other disciplines, and this is how I felt about EC. Granted, when I was in college, I was not very open to the engineering department. Like if I went to college today, I would be in a lab, I would be speaking to my professors. I would not be so obsessed with social, like just things that really, I would try and be more involved with the actual discipline of the academics
Hmm.
than where I was 10 years ago, which I really just wanted a degree.
Yeah.
And so I guess, but even with that, I still felt, even telling, with that consideration that I didn't give it my all 10 years ago, I still felt like the EC department was struggling in integrating a modern curriculum with the internet. And I don't know if it was just that department. I feel like it was something that possibly spanned most of academia, where it was like, okay, we used to have our own, single, maybe 1 to 5 sources of knowledge that we're going to reference for this class. Well, now there's all those sources of knowledge are pretty much available. What they're attempting to communicate is easily available on the internet.
Yep.
So how are we going to adjust the way we teach with that in mind?
Right. I mean, I think there's still value in having guided instruction.
Yes.
Like when I take online classes, like I can't do the learn at your own pace thing. I have to have deadlines. And like I always appreciate having an instructor that I can ask questions to. Maybe that's just because I grew up with that academic model and that's what I'm accustomed to. Like I'm not sure if that applies to everyone, especially like later generations, like learning through COVID online. um, but I do think the whole, you know, you have to buy this $200 textbook and read these chapters thing is completely outdated. And it's just not how I learn either.
No.
Um, Especially like because a book is so static, it only explains things one way. Whereas, yeah,
Yes.
you can go onto YouTube and like 6 different people can explain the same topic in a slightly different way, and one of those methods might just click with you, you know? So yeah, no, I think the UCE department was quite outdated, at least at UCSD at the time, 10 years ago. Um, and I think, they are, I do know they had a big effort to try to make things more hands-on because UCSD, at least the UC department, had this terrible reputation for being too theoretical. And employers were like, "Hey, man, you're graduates. Like, they can't like they can't even use like an O scope or something like that." So there's a big push to get more students time in the lab and be more hands-on, actually building and designing things. But like you said, incorporating, other sources from the internet, and other teaching perspectives that you might glean from the internet. Um, I I haven't seen that, and it's interesting to see how the academic model might change. Now that all the information's out there and it's free.
It is interesting. And when
Yeah,
you take into account the expense of
it's
academia,
crazy.
it's
Yeah,
very high.
I mean, it's just it's so I can't. I was lucky that I was able to graduate debt free, and I have my parents to thank for helping me out some quarters with tuition assistance, and I also had to work during college. But I just can't imagine what it's like to be straddled with debt, you know,
And
afterwards, and it's insane, the cost of an education nowadays.
it is insane. And what
Yeah.
we did for in-state UCSD was pretty cheap
Yeah,
relative to what some other people paid.
right.
It was,
Yeah, there was some like people paying it seemed like on par with like Ivy League tuition, you know. It's just like
yes,
I, you know, I don't
it's
know how
very
anyone could
high.
afford that. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people are still paying off those bills today,
Yeah.
6, 7 years later.
Yeah.
And it's a real, I mean, the issue is, like what's going on there? Like there's a lot of issues with that model of what happened there,
Yeah.
and we don't have to get into that, but it is uh it is an expensive it's an expensive institution to be a part of.
Oh,
Takes a long time. So, it's definitely something to be aware of, that like, you know, going into college, being aware of like this is going to be a while. Is this actually what I want to do? It's a very tough thing for an 18-year-old to be aware of, like
yeah.
in the moment. Like, and so it's just a little interesting, the huge steps we give the huge, the huge requirements we have of 18-year-olds, when the education of how dramatic these choices can be isn't really communicated too well.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I guess I kind of got lucky. I chose electronics engineering just on a whim. I was like, this sounds kind of cool. I'll do it. I had no background, no experience with the field when I graduated from high school. Um, and yeah, it was hard, but I ended up liking it and working in it. And yeah, it's a good job. It pays really well. Lets me live in San Diego. Lets me surf and pursue all my other hobbies. Um, but I mean, that is such a stressful choice because it kind of like it's almost like, you know, even though this is not true, because you can earn your degree and then do whatever the heck you want afterwards, but it's almost like this mindset of like, I have to pick the degree for like the thing that I'm going to be doing for like, a good portion of my life. Like, this is going to
Yes.
set my career up. Um, and I think, there are certain degrees that kind of allow you a little bit more flexibility in that, or at least like, they kind of are like a safe bet. Whereas, like for engineering, for instance, right? It's like, you know, you can get a degree in engineering and then you can go do whatever the heck you want. You don't have to do engineering after college, you can. decide to go to business school, or like start your own business, or um, you know, go do whatever suits your fancy. Um, so I think, having an engineering or like a STEM degree kind of, you know, it's kind of safe in a way, to where like you always have the option to go back to it, um, because I didn't pick my degree based on like my passion. I picked it based
No,
on practicality.
me too.
Yeah,
I picked it on practicality, which is okay because it actually kind of has grown into my passion.
exactly. You never know where it'll take you. Like I love engineering now. I think it's freaking awesome.
I think it's awesome too. And there's a lot of people who graduated with engineering degrees that are not in the field anymore.
Yeah,
And when it reached the time for their career, they were not into it, which is fine
yeah,
because really that degree is all about proof that you can work and
yeah,
do, do things.
yeah. You
And
can meet a goal.
it
Exactly.
is. There are a lot of experiences to be gained and network connections to be gained to people who will have eventually similar interests and, similar ages and kind of, similar mindsets.
Right.
So that, speaking with them, building relationships with them is important too. But, proving that we're capable is a big reason we're there as well.
Definitely. Yeah.
Wow. So, Josh, do you have any last words about the outdoors or engineering or anything that you'd like to tell the audience?
Yeah, guys, just be kind, go surfing. That's the best advice I can give. Might be a little biased, but um, yeah, no. Thanks for having me on here, man. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. My guest today has been Josh Jain. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Josh.
Thank you. Peace out.